supply shocks. There are growing signs of a higher pass-through of input costs to selling prices. The MPC noted that inflation is likely to remain above the upper tolerance band of 6% through the first 3 quarters of the current financial year, that is 22-23. In this context, supply-side measures taken by the government in reducing excise duties on petrol and diesel, along with other measures, would help in mitigating the inflationary pressures to some extent. The MPC also recognized that sustained high inflation could unhinge inflation expectations and trigger second-round effects. The MPC therefore judged that further monetary policy measures are necessary to anchor the inflation expectations. Accordingly, the MPC decided to increase the policy repo rate by 50 basis points to 4.9%. The MPC also decided to remain focused on withdrawal of accommodation to ensure that inflation remains within the target going forward while supporting growth. It may be noted in this context that the repo rate still remains below its pre-pandemic level. I would now like to provide an assessment, a more detailed assessment of growth and inflation. And first, I would like to take up growth. According to the provisional estimates released by the National Statistical Office, that is NSO, on May 31st, India's gross domestic product, that is GDP growth, in 21-22 is estimated at 8.7%. This level of real GDP in 21-22 has exceeded the pre-pandemic, that is the 2019-20 level. On the supply side, major categories also surpassed the 2019-20 level. Available information for April and May indicates that the recovery in domestic economic activity remains firm, with growth impulses getting increasingly broad-based. Manufacturing and services purchasing managers indices, that is the PMI, for May point towards further expansion of activity. This is also corroborated by movements in railway freight and port traffic, domestic air traffic, GST collections, steel consumption, cement production, and bank credit. While urban demand is recovering, rural demand is gradually improving. The contact-intensive services related to trade, hotels, and transport have recovered in Q4 of 21-22. Going by the early results of our surveys, capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector increased further to 74.5% in the fourth quarter of 21-22 from 72.4% in Q3 of 21-22. So that is in the last financial year, 21-22, between Q3 and Q4, the capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector increased from 72.4 to 74.5%. Capacity utilization is also likely to increase further in the current financial year. Investment activity is thus expected to strengthen, driven by rising capacity utilization, government's capital expenditure, and deleveraged corporate balance sheets. Improvement in investment activity is also reflected in pickup in demand for bank credit and persisting growth in imports of capital goods. Merchandise exports have remained buoyant with double-digit growth for the 15th successive month in May this year, while high growth of non-oil, non-gold imports is indicative of recovery in domestic demand conditions. Looking ahead, real GDP is expected to broadly evolve on the lines of the April MPC resolution. The forecast of normal southwest monsoon should boost kharif sowing and agricultural output. This will support rural consumption. The rebound in contact-intensive services is expected to sustain urban consumption. Our surveys suggest further improvement in consumer confidence and households' optimism for the outlook a year ahead. Business sentiment remains upbeat according to early results of our surveys. Nevertheless, the negative spillovers from geopolitical tensions, elevated international commodity prices, rising input costs, tightening of global financial conditions, and slowdown in world economy continue to weigh on the outlook. Taking all these factors into consideration, the real GDP growth for 2022-23, that is for the current year, is retained at 7.2%.
வங்கி கடன் வட்டி விகிதம் 0.5% உயர்வதாக ரிசர்வ் வங்கி கவர்னர் சக்திகாந்த தாஸ் தெரிவித்திருக்கிறார். இதன் மூலம் குறுகிய கால வங்கி கடன் வட்டி விகிதம் 4.9% உயர்கிறது.
உடனுக்குடன் செய்திகளை தெரிந்து கொள்ள சன் நியூஸ் பெல் ஐகானை கிளிக் பண்ணுங்க.